Spend a whole lot of time talking about different pieces of guitar gear and how you can learn to use them and essentially control them to get the sounds you want to talk about. And I get a lot of messages, like say I do an Axe Effects preset and I'll share it, and some people will say, hey, this sounds awesome, but when I use it through my rig, I'm using the same monitors, I'm using a very similar guitar, it sounds totally different. Why is that? And it'd be very easy to turn around and do the old, hey man, like tone is in the fingers. If I played through Eddie Van Halen's rig, I wouldn't sound like Eddie Van Halen. And I think that's quite a limited perspective on it. A lot of the time, it actually comes down to things that you can quantify, like your pick attack, or your vibrato, or your left and right hand muting. So in this video, I want to talk about three things that to me really, no matter what level you're playing at, no matter how long you've been playing, that you can think about that can really help you dial in a guitar sound just by using your hands and your ears. So the first one is like your sonic fingerprint, your vibrato, right? And a lot of the time people say, this is my vibrato. Like you think of Paul Gilbert, Paul Gilbert's vibrato. You think of Gary Moore, Gary Moore's vibrato. You think of Robin Trower, Robin Trower's vibrato. But in reality, vibrato is something that can be varied, that you can control. For example, one way I really like to use vibrato when I'm playing, say I'm playing a song at a particular tempo, would be to play a note and then not apply vibrato immediately. It would be like wait 1 or 2 beats. Say I was playing something that's going 1, 2, 3, 4. Rather than I find that a lot of the time, especially inexperienced players, they'll get a vibrato that they like, but they'll use it on absolutely everything. Imagine listening to a singer and they use the same vibrato on every single note they play. Or you could hear there that it just becomes too predictable. And a lot of the time when you're playing music, you know, it's about that tension between what you want to hear, essentially the predictable elements, whether they be rhythmic or harmonic or melodic, and the things you're not expecting. And being able to change up your vibrato, whether it's the way you play vibrato, like where you put it, like I was waiting 2 beats there, or having notes where you play immediately and add vibrato, or notes where you don't have any vibrato, or notes where you have a fast vibrato or a slow vibrato. I'll give you an example of that. I'll wait a few beats on the first note, then I'll apply no vibrato, then I'll apply my vibrato immediately, then I'll use a subtle vibrato, then I'll use a really wide one. That's just one musical example of just some noodling around. So if you wanted to practice this, what I would recommend is just take a simple phrase, like say 3 notes. Say, I'm tuned down a whole step. So if you want to play along, you'd be playing in G minor pentatonic, but it's going to look like A minor pentatonic. Just take these 3 notes. Yeah, I played 4 notes, but there were 3 distinct notes there. If you're playing along in standard tuning, it would be A, 7th fret on the D string, C, 5th fret on the G string, and then G, 5th fret on the D string. Of course, these all sound a tone lower at the moment because I'm playing this guitar, so... You can hear there that by putting different styles of vibrato on different notes, it can really change the way that particular run feels. And that's a great way to spend 10-15 minutes. You can drive your neighbors absolutely nuts by sitting there and playing the same phrase over and over again. But it's all about applying vibrato in that particular way. Like... And ultimately, to me, that communicates different emotions. Like if you imagine, again, I think about singers a lot. If somebody was using that really heavy, wide vibrato and hitting a high note, it kind of sounds like somebody screaming, you know, I get that feeling in my chest where it's like, oh, I have like a physical reaction to that. Whereas if I heard somebody, you know, playing down low with a really soft vibrato, it's almost like they might be telling a joke or something like that. Something like that anyway. So vibrato is definitely something you can think about, and it's definitely something you can practice. The second one is muting. I'm talking about right hand muting and left hand muting here. So a lot of the time you'll hear inexperienced players do stuff like this. You know, they'll be playing and they're not using any muting at all, like this. And you can hear the whole guitar ringing out there, even if I play a simple phrase. And that's all coming from right hand muting. Left hand muting is really important as well. For example, and this kind of just comes down to like, are you going to play directly on your fingertip or are you going to play with a flat finger? I pinched this from Frank Gambale, who's got an amazing series of videos he did in the late 80s. One's called Chop Builder, one is called Monster Licks and Speed Picking, and the other is called Modes, No More Mystery. So go and check those out if you haven't, because Frank's an amazing teacher. They haven't dated particularly well fashion-wise, but the advice there is incredible. And you know, he talks about using the underside of your pointer finger or whatever finger you're fretting with to mute the high strings. Say you're playing on the D string, right? Let me give you some of that. Rather than play with your hand like that, you're going to be playing with your hand kind of like that so that you're muting the strings, right? So rather than this, and just being able to deaden them enough is really going to help with noise. And then you're using your right hand on the low strings, just basically pressing it on the bridge. And that's going to stop those low strings sympathetically resonating and ringing out, especially if you play really loud, right? You're trying to play a riff and the guitar just takes off and feeds back. We've all seen people who have never played through loud amps with a lot of gain before do that kind of thing where their technique's not really dialed into that. Another thing as well, like for muting, is just use your volume control. It's a really good habit to be in. Say you play something, roll it off. It's the best noise gate you can have because then there's no noise going into your amp. So in a sort of similar manner, we can talk about articulation as well. I think there's a really, really big factor when it comes to like rock and metal tones as well. Like I was saying earlier, if I share a preset and somebody says, hey, it doesn't really sound the same. If I play a particular riff and I pick really hard and I dig my pick in, it's going to sound like this. And you can hear there that I wasn't really applying left-hand muting very well there, so I should take some of my own advice. But if you play soft with no like right-hand muting or anything, you get this. The opposite applies there as well. Like you saw in the middle, I was playing really soft, then I kind of gave it what I would consider like 3/4 pace, right? Where it's like, it's still musical, but you're not overdoing it. And then totally overdoing it and hitting it as hard as I can. Sometimes hitting it as hard as you can is really good, but in the same way that that person who plays really delicately and softly just kind of sounds really underwhelming, that person who thinks they're Stevie Ray Vaughan on cocaine, just going absolutely nuts all the time, is never pleasant to listen to either. There's no musicality really in either of them because there's no control over your articulation. Some people might say dynamics. I'm choosing to say the word articulation because it really does play into how the notes come out, the way you might be speaking. And you're trying to get your guitar to communicate with people, obviously. So you want it to be articulate and you want to have control over that articulation. Part of that comes down to the left hand as well. Like a common mistake I see a lot of people, whether they're beginners or really seasoned makers, say they're trying to do a legato run, but they're like pressing this part of their hand, you can see there, onto the neck. So they're severely restricting how far they can move. Furthermore, that like changes the sound of the guitar. If I play right on my fingertip, I'll use the neck pickup as well. That's another thing, like use your pickup selector, but we can get into that at another time. I'm gonna play right on my fingertips. Now I'm gonna play with flat fingers and like dig my hand in here. You know, that thumb over the top technique's really good if you're doing bluesy stuff, but if you wanted to play like heavy metal legato, it's not really going to work. So you would need to use your fingertips and use your fingers in a different way to get a different type of articulation in there. And being able to combine that with your right hand as well. You know, if you were a chug guy, you can do a couple of different types of muting. You can play wide open really heavy. Or you can do the classic like Metallica palm muting right on where the string breaks over the bridge. Or you can do the sort of like modern gent muting where you actually mute like over the bridge so you're on the string. The difference between those is this. Using your right hand there, you're able to articulate the notes in a different manner. Same thing with your left hand there as well, like whether you're playing lead stuff and really playing on your fingertips. Or playing kind of with flat fingers and going for more of a bluesy thing. And none of these things are right or wrong. They're just things to think about because they're elements of your playing that you can choose to control if you practice them. It's one of those things. You don't have to do any of these things, but having control over them, that should really be the reason you practice. You know, not to become a robot who just plays like a bazillion notes a minute. If you're going to do that, like go to the gym and, you know, lift weights and learn to deadlift a lot because at least that way you look really great when you do it. You know, music's not about that. Music should be about expressiveness, and having control over that expression will only make your music better. So, yeah, I hope there was something valuable in this lesson. These are basically a whole bunch of things that I tell people to do, and I also think about when I'm trying to play guitar as well. There's actually, you know, there's a common question, what do you think about when you're playing guitar? Not much, really. I just try to play nowadays, but when I do think about it, it's not about like, where do I need to put my metronome or anything like that. It's more about, do I have control over these really fundamental elements of my playing? Like, am I controlling the muting? Am I controlling the articulation by the way I play? Am I playing too heavy? Am I playing too soft? How's my vibrato? I think the vibrato is the big one. You know, that's something I'll just sit here and play for like half an hour until I kind of feel happy with where my vibrato's sitting. So yeah, like I said, I hope there's some interesting information in this. If you watched all of the video, thank you so much. I hope I didn't make you too angry or make you want to like rage quit on your computer. If you've got any suggestions or there's things that you think about when you're playing, let me know in the comments. Share it with your mates. Smash that like button, and I'll see you guys next time.